right, so we're here with another podcast episode. So I'm Adele and I'm joined by Sam McSorley.
Hello, Adele. You're on. How are you?
I'm good. I'm good. So today we're going to be talking about perfectionism and stress and how perfectionism and stress are really tightly interlinked. And yeah, where should we begin? I suppose what is
Well,
what is perfectionism? Yeah. So I think from my perspective, and I'd love to hear yours as well. I mean, perfectionism is this mindset, the striving for this incredibly high level of expectation either coming from within, coming from external factors, but it involves a lot of this kind of critical self-talk and this eating away at self and the fear of failure if I don't achieve this unrealistic set of expectations. That's kind of what
yeah,
I understand by it.
I think that's a really nice summary of it. And I think just to tag into that is that it's also often an unconscious behavior.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
that's the fascinating part is that people will see this perfectionist, high achieving person, which is like it manifests in high achievement and social perfection. And people can see that in you, but you can't necessarily see it in yourself. And that's the fascinating part that this unconscious drive to be everything and have these really high, almost unattainable expectations on yourself. It's like what a pressure, right?
yeah. But not only that, it can be an addiction, which is something we spoke about in the last episode. It's this constant push. We can get addicted to the adrenaline around it. We can get addicted to the high if we achieve something close to the expectation. But it's a game that you play that it never has an end goal. It never finishes. It's never good enough. It's never done. It's like cooked.
Yeah.
If you think about it, it's like, why would we play this game with ourselves? Like,
Yeah,
it's almost cruel to put ourselves in that position.
it's cruel. And I think you're just kind of giving a little teaser on the sensitivity cycle, which I know you're going to talk about a little bit later. But like if we just talk about like where does perfectionism come from? Like how come I mean, let's first of all put hands up who identifies with this perfectionist trait.
Yeah, 100%. Me, you.
Where's it come from? You
Mm,
know?
yeah.
And and it's often um, coming from looking at the model of what your parents had done for you as a child. That can be one causative factor, is that these high achieving parents, and this becomes the normal of life, and so you go, oh, this is how we're doing life.
Yeah.
Also critical family relationships can be one of the causes. Yeah, what's your understanding of the causative factors?
I mean, I think there are many. It's a system. And I think one of the crucial aspects is definitely it's like nature versus nurture. I mean, as you in your work, there's a genetic component to it as well. Sometimes perfectionism can be traced in your DNA, but sometimes it's your environment that you grew up in, and it can be caused because you have pressure from parents and overbearing parents that are putting unrealistic standards on you, but you societal pressure, cultural pressure. But there's also can be the lack of pressure. No one cares. So it's like an intrinsic thing that I'm putting pressure on myself, and perhaps by my actions and what I achieve and what I do, I will receive love and acceptance in the world. So it can either come from outside or it can be inside, but it is very much the sense of a pressure cooker around this person. No choice, no freedom. And if we look at Hakomi and the character strategies, like the industrious over focused character strategy is hugely driven by this pressure cooker of I must do this
Yeah.
to be loved, to be accepted, and to feel included in the world.
And to feel valued and be of worth in the world. Like that's one of the driving strategies of that character.
Yeah,
And self-reliance as well, is that I can just do it all by myself. So it kind of like it can be a lonely place for people. And
very.
certainly been my experience as well, is it's just so industrious and over focused and never completed, like never good enough. Nothing's ever good enough. It could have done better. Um, And that can be quite a lonely road to travel for many.
Yeah, sad
Mm.
actually. And I think for me the sadness not only in navigating my own kind of perfectionism management, because I wouldn't say there's recovery, it's like awareness and the management of it. I think I'll ever recover from being a perfectionist. But it's this sense of never enough, never good
Mm.
enough, never
Mm.
quite got there. And then that feeling of when you achieve something it's not quite to standard. So it's this constant feeling of never hitting an expectation, and a lot of challenges associated with that. It can, and a lot of clients that I work with, and I know you work with as well, like a lot of depression, a lot of anxiety, a lot of burnout. What are some of the other challenges that you've seen in your clinical practice with people that just have these unrelenting levels of expectations of themselves or others?
But there's definitely that bi-directional relationship between perfectionism and stress. And last week we did touch on the HPA axis, and again designed for short bursts of stress, but perfectionism is long, chronic stress,
Mm,
like this
mm.
chronic state of stress because of this high expectation. But because of that, you can see relationship breakdowns, which is something I know that you focus on in your work. You can see the insomnia, you can see digestive complaints, you can see that they're spinning so many plates that they often can't finish tasks as well because they've actually taken on too much. So then that becomes a burden. So it's almost like so we talked about that character strategy of being industrious and over focused and self-reliant, but you can also, they've got this real burden about them. And again, it's like it's an unconscious, and so you can look at their body language when they sit in the chair, and it's a bit, you
Yeah,
know,
big sigh. And I
sorry.
think and I think the sadness as well is that it's a system.
Mm.
In that the world rewards people that are perfectionists, and they don't want you to change that contract that they have with you. They expect that of you, and then the more you do and perform at that level, it then becomes an expectation then within the workplace or within your families or your environments. Well, I come to expect that of you. You've now got to continue performing at this level. So you kind of stuffed yourself in a way, and it is just this never ending monster. I call it my achievement monster. And when it rears its head, I get single-minded focused, and it's just driven, and I will not pay attention to subtle signals within my body or how I'm doing health wise. It's like I don't even pay attention to how I'm doing. I just keep going, and that's how we can get burnt out.
And I'm laughing not because it's funny, but because it's highly relatable. So I've had two burnouts, and the first one I didn't see coming at all. And I remember talking with a colleague about, I was coming out the other side of my burnout, and it takes a while to recover from a burnout. Being all things to all people, and almost like I had dusters on my feet so that when I was walking in the kitchen, I was polishing the floor. Like the multitasking was next level. Do you know what I mean? Like I was
Yeah.
like zealous and didn't even recognize it in myself until I just stopped operating. And the
Yeah.
stop operating is like, that's what it was like. And my colleague said to me, "Oh, you'll have another one. You won't learn from this one." And I'm like, no, there's no way I'm having another one of these. And I did. But I'm not going
Yeah.
to have a third because, it's just like, well, one of the key things, of course, around that is that how do you break the cycle, or how do you don't stop being a perfectionist, as you say, but like, what are some of the things that you can do to break the cycle? What have you done with some of your clients?
I think the first thing is when I work with people that are incredibly high achievers that are prone to burnout, and they break under this unrelenting pressure, is the first step is really what we call psychoeducation, is really understanding what is this? What is driving me like this? And at the heart of a lot of perfectionism, there is a tendency to kind of have it arise from a distorted thinking pattern. So the cognitive distortions and understanding those are actually quite vital, because distortions lead to unrealistic expectations. And it's like a cycle that starts to happen. So the self-criticism actually comes from them. And if you know all the different cognitive distortions, it's really quite helpful. So I'll run through some of them that really are associated to perfectionism, because not all cognitive distortions are relevant for perfectionism. But the first one would be what we would call all or nothing thinking. It's a very, very black and white, rigid way of, there's no room for middle ground. It's like, if I don't do this exactly like this, I'm a total failure. So it's quite extreme. It's like, if it's not this, then it's absolute disaster. And that can also be catastrophizing. All or nothing thinking can lead to catastrophizing. So if I miss this deadline, my entire career is ruined. I'm going to be fired. This terrible thing is going to happen if I miss this, or if I don't nail this, if I don't do this. Overgeneralizing, where one mistake actually now defines your entire character. So if I messed up this project, I'm never going to succeed. Mental filtering. Okay, I made one typo. The whole document is a disaster. The client's just going to zoom in on this one document. It's going to be a mess. Distorting or discounting the positive. So it's also not receiving nourishment or praise from other people. It's like, yeah, I mean, I did finish on time, and sure, we did the project, but I could have done better. It wasn't quite what I wanted it to be. So we're constantly being hard on ourselves or self-deprecating in the way that we receive that kind of positive feedback. Should statements. I mean, my life is full of should statements, but I should have done that. I could have done that. Why didn't I do that? That hindsight bias of looking back in time and being so rigid and cruel to ourselves about how we assess the situation in the past. Personalization. There's another cognitive distortion where we take excessive responsibility for problems or failures, like, well, the team didn't succeed and I didn't, that's my fault that the team didn't succeed at something. And the magnification of criticism. So if somebody just gives you a tiny piece of feedback, like, hey, next time, blah, 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 this is now an absolute freaking disaster. The whole thing is a disaster. So
Yeah, yeah. So it's almost like, just listening to you there, it's like it's at opposite ends in the spectrum. It's almost like black and white thinking, right? It's this or it's that.
yeah,
And get in the middle's kind of void. And that
gone.
kind of didn't quite, yeah, it's gone. So that would be something that you could work on in therapy, is like, where is this piece in the middle? Like there's kind of like a disjunct between the black and the white, or the opposite ends of the spectrum. And one of the things I was looking at is just like this cascade event that perfectionism causes stress, and then bidirectionally, stress amplifies perfectionism. And like, so how do you get out? How do you get out of it? And I think one of the key things that you're talking about is like doing the psych aid, and then there's like this distortion part where it got me curious, and I'm thinking, well, not mindfulness as in the buzzword, but mindfulness as we would use in Hakomi, where we encourage the observing part of self to onboard and look at these distortions of, and almost like normal dissociation in a way, not pathologizing dissociation, but looking at how can we join these two parts together and make them kind of talk with each other, because something's happened in the middle. And I think that that's kind of what we're looking at in Hakomi, is like, what was the missing experience in your life that has helped develop this perfectionist trait, which has now become part of this unattainable achievement in life. Yeah.
And
And
also it's like feeling into it as well. Like sometimes, you can work on it. You can work with it with cognitive restructuring as part of cognitive behavioral therapy. I mean, that's definitely one way to tackle it, but it doesn't go all the way. It's not deep enough. I found, like, even in my own exploration of perfectionism, CBT was pretty good. You sort of catch some things, but I found the mindfulness in and the study of seeing this as a part of me, and actually distinguishing and becoming observant and aware that the perfectionistic parts of me are parts. So like
yes,
we have in internal family systems, we actually recognize parts as a part. Well, there's a part of me that really is like unrelenting in its pursuit of getting this thing done. But then there's another part of me that just wants to rest. and just
Yeah.
chill back and have a pina colada and, like, get some sun on her face. But this other part's like, no, you must continue. You must strive for this, like, ridiculous, like, level. So when you don't have balance between these two, you cannot then negotiate which part wins. And if your perfectionistic part becomes a manager of your entire internal system, I mean, that is part of what can lead to stress and burnout, is the unrelenting voice actually wins. And that's where it's really sad. And in this therapy, it's about a meeting place of these parts and feeling into them in your body, and like, well, why must this one that is the manager win? Who
Yeah.
decided that? Where does that come from?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And of course, just to note, internal family systems, which is Richard Schwartz's work, was just phenomenal. There's so much information online
Yeah.
about his work, which is just phenomenal. But what I found last week with a client in particular was there was this perfectionist part that we had, come forward, and when I say come forward, was willing to be reviewed, and wanted rid of this perfectionist part.
Mm.
I just posed a question: is like, how why don't we just try and get to know it a little bit more and see what it knows and see what it's like for it? And it went, oh, I'm exhausted, like
Yeah.
angry and resentful. And so then we started bringing in other parts, like, what's the resentful part got to say? And so we started kind of mapping out other parts that were attached to perfectionism. And I think, as what you're saying, is like CBT goes a long way. And but I think coupled with this deep internal work, and that's why I love Hakomi so much, is because it's not so much cognitive, in that it's on the edge of the unconscious mind, and it's somatic, so it's about what's felt in the body, and
Yeah.
we feel in the body and how things made us feel. And you don't need to have a memory for that, because that's something that's experienced. And that's why I
And
love
and
it.
sometimes you don't have words for things. And perfectionism doesn't isn't a thought through process. Like, you can find words from it if I ask you a question about it, but
Yeah.
it's actually a feeling. It's a
Mm,
drive that overrides your own, body's inclination towards survival or safety. It just overrides it. And so there's this overriding part in your body that is pushing sometimes beyond what is healthy and what is normal. And if we don't meet it in the body,
mm,
you can be as aware as you want that you're running an all or nothing kind of like distortion, or you're stuck in your should statements, but the body will keep the score, the body wins. And I love what you say about, like leaning into and finding out more about that part, because there are no bad parts. The perfectionism part of you has a function. It is trying to meet a need. It is trying to do something, and it's burdened. It is a
yeah,
part that is very, very burdened by pressure. And if we don't get some biographical data as where this one comes from, why it's there, what's going on for it, we don't then actually figure out how we can support it and help it rest.
and I think that kind of edges nicely into these manager parts and these protector parts, which feel burdened, and that kind of leads nicely into, we're all just trying to cover up our shame. And so
Yeah,
I know that you work a lot with that. So yeah, can you
yeah.
talk?
So, I mean, shame and perfectionism are massively interlinked in a cycle. And Sylvan Tompkins did a lot of work on the compass of shame, and he's got quite a nice model that sort of works on how perfectionism works in the cycle. And when we're in that place of perfectionism, we have withdrawal in the beginning. There could be attacking of self, there could be avoidance, and then the attacking of others. So withdrawal is obviously, I'm avoiding all social interactions where I might have failure or criticism experiences, or I feel paralyzed by the possibility of actually doing anything. So I'll just withdraw and I'll just procrastinate. So the procrastination and perfectionism really go hand in hand, and the part of that withdrawal piece. And then with the next part of shame is this like sense of attacking yourself, the self-criticism, and that's where the distortions live. And intense self-criticism if your goals aren't met, the expectations aren't actually met, and this feeling of unworthiness. And sometimes for some people, shame can be a real motivator because they believe that if I punish myself, it will lead to better performance in the future. So I'm going to be a better person if I beat myself over the head. And you know, who came up with this carrot and stick approach in the first place? Like, it's probably part of this kind of was probably invented by a perfectionist. And then the third is this the sense of avoidance, and again, it's that I don't want to deal with this. It's painful to look at it. I'm in denial. I perceive tasks where I might fail, or I'm overcommitted to avoid feeling anything. So I'll just keep moving and keep going. And that avoidance can also lead to procrastination or to overdoing, and that can lead to the burnout again. And then the final part is then, if all else fails, I'll just attack somebody else. Well, I failed, but you failed more than me. And like, I'll just project over there and just, so it's like finding yourself, like, where are you in the shame cycle? And what is then the source of shame? Because shame is also a part, right? There's
Yeah.
also part of this critical like cycle. There's a part of us in our psyche that is holding all of that. And oftentimes this is a very delicate part. It needs to be met with great sensitivity within a therapeutic process. And often using a lot of self-compassion focused type therapy. Hakomi is really great for that. IFS is really great for that. But it's again, the kind of more cognitive CBT type models don't spend a lot of time looking at shame. It's the sensory motor psychotherapies where they go deeper into like how to meet shame and from a really loving place.
I think that touches really nicely on like the shame part that's just so delicate and fragile because it's a young part. It's often a child part. It can happen later in life, but often what we're seeing is that we have organized our core organizations are set up by the time we're 7, right? We know that from there's just an abundance of research. So your environment at home is you organize yourself around it. And these parts that are created are in beneficence, so they're in good faith to help you operate in the world. And when you're dealing with these really young parts, like just to touch on the language of cognitive behavioral therapy, is that because these are young parts, often have used quite simple language. And I want to talk about the I guess the determinants of language is that they're built on social constructs. And so because of that, they have limitations. And so sometimes there's no words for feelings based on the environment by which you learnt your vocabulary and language. Okay. And there's cultural differences and all of those things involved in that. And of course, when you're going into these sensory somatic states on this tapping into that edge of unconsciousness and often bringing in dual consciousness with the adult and the child, is that you have to keep it really, really simple. Because often in a Hakomi session, of course, you're connecting with the child part and they're feeling it and they're there. They can remember the clothes that they're wearing. They can tell you what color the wallpaper was in the bedroom, for example, or it's a memory that is held in the body, and language can't articulate that.
100%. And I think this is where you can kind of see where it comes from in yourself. You can spontaneously and unconsciously, there might be a memory or there might be something that is holding that space for yourself, and you can feel into it much faster through the body than simply by in the present moment recognizing the distortion and flicking out of it. Like, sure, that can be very effective, and I've seen many people purely by psychoeducation, they go maybe 50% along the journey of the management of their perfectionism, but it's really like nailing the full aspect of the journey and being absolutely fine spending a day in a hammock reading some book, not doing anything at all. It's like that actually requires perhaps a little bit more deeper work and setting more realistic expectations from a place of self-love, as opposed to this unrelenting, I must, I have to, I should. Mm.
Now, so I just want to touch on something that I was quite tickled with a wee while back about closet resting. And I wondered whether you
Well,
might.
an act of relaxing. But yeah, closet resting, that is definitely yeah, yeah. When I was a little girl, I used to hide in the closet with my spiked teddy and rest. Because it was like it was almost like something about my childhood was we must be industrious, we must keep doing stuff. And somehow resting, some adult would pop their head through, you resting, right? Off to the kitchen, go wash some dishes, go make yourself useful. So I would hide to sleep. And I still do it today. Like if I'm lying on the couch and my partner comes home, I like jump up and immediately look feverishly busy with something. And it's just nonsense. It's just this like feeling I should be industrious and doing something.
I know, and I do that with John too. Like I might, if I've got like 10 minutes, I'll go. Oh, I think I might just lie on the couch because I'm exhausted. And then he'll come in, and I'll just like get up, and I'll go. I was just having a lie on the couch, and he goes, "It's all right, love. You're allowed to lie on the couch." And I go, "Am I? Am I allowed to?"
It's almost like we need permission, like we need to find permission from externally. It's got to happen extrinsically. You need a doctor's note to say that you're okay to like take a day off. And a lot of this is driven by fear. At the heart of all of perfectionism is a fear of being unlovable, a fear of not being, being enough, a fear of somehow I'm going to be like alone, abandoned, and or in trouble. I'm going to get into a lot of trouble if I don't do this. And that's where a lot of these distortions kind of come from, is this fear at the heart of all of it. Hmm.
Mm. So, on that note, next week, as we come to a close with today's podcast, next week we're going to be discussing more on stress, and yeah, so tune in. I've loved discussing this today because it's such a hot topic, isn't it? Like this
Yeah.
constant told us that if you're not industrious and over focused, then somehow there's, like that's how we've measured
Well,
success.
there was one more thing I wanted to discuss associated to perfectionism, which was really in Hakomi, we have this concept of a sensitivity cycle. And the sensitivity cycle is useful to understand in your recovery from perfectionism or your management of perfectionism, in that we have four parts in how we begin something, we do something, and how we end something, like the seasons. There's beginning, middle, and ending of things. And in perfectionism, we're not good at ending or finishing things. We just keep being in that cycle of this industrious element. We never rest. So the four corners of the sensitivity cycle is really clarity, where we have to sort of get clear, what is it that we're doing? Next is effective action. We want to kind of produce something. Then is when we've produced the thing we want to produce, we want to feel satisfied. And when we're really satisfied, we can now rest. And that rest is really important before we get clarity. But when you're perfectionistic, it interrupts the cycle. So in the clarity, instead of actually like, okay, I'm going to do this, this is great, perfectionism monster comes in and goes, no, all or nothing thinking, it's not good enough. If I can't fully understand the problem, I can't plan the perfect solution. So we spend hours and hours now gathering more and more information. It's never enough information. And that fear of imperfection will cloud your ability to make a decision. And if you can't make a decision, you then can't respond and act effectively. So then you get thwarted here because you can't start the project unless the project is all mapped out perfectly. And so we procrastinate, and then we get stuck in this section here. And then because these two are all about this kind of stage, we never feel satisfied. It's never enough. Perfectionism will say, well, we either downplay the achievement, well, that was nothing, next time we'll do better, or the achievements are overshadowed by criticism. We focus on what we didn't do, we should have done, or we could have done better. And then the final stage is that letting go and completion stage. We never done because it was never enough. So in the recovery part, or the management of perfectionism, it's firstly labeling. okay, this is what I'm doing. It's that mindfulness and starting to really observe the monster and how it behaves and how it acts. And next would be the embracing of self-compassion, like really being kind to yourself. Like, gosh, my 70% is everyone else's 100%. Like, why am I being so hard? Like, actually having perspective as well, and compassion with self. Why am I driving myself so incredibly hard all the time? Um, and practicing gratitude, and just like, actually, we did do great. Let's celebrate the win in that. It was something. And recognizing that any progress is better than no progress at all. So let's just start somewhere. Let's just do something. And if we make a mistake, let's just learn from it. It's feedback, and we just bounce back. And sometimes we can make a mistake and it's not the end of the world. Like I had a client who she did something where she sent really, she's a lawyer, and she sent really important information to the opposition that basically gave away the entire game plan. And she was, I've just done this terrible thing. Oh my gosh. And I said to her, just, it is what it is. Like, let it play out. Let's see what happens. Maybe them having access to your entire game plan, because your game plan is so perfect, they may freak out and you may settle. And they did. There was actually like this whole panic, and she didn't sleep for 3 days and all this stuff. And then actually by them having access to that thing, it all worked out, and they freaked out because it was such a brilliant plan, and realized that she was a step ahead. So I think just in the management of perfectionism, it's just being mindful that it's the management of it. You can never really recover from it. It's not something you are ever going to be like solved. It's always going to be niggling in the background, and you got to manage that niggle.
Yeah, and I just to touch on that again, though, that often it's unconscious behaviors. So there's a lot of perfectionists in the world that don't even realize that they're perfectionists and wandering around with this high pressured, state. And of course, the first thing you need to know is that you are a perfectionist. And often that doesn't happen until some kind of crisis presents itself, like having a burnout. And then you were just like,
Yeah.
oh, okay, when you look back on that, I'm not quite sure how I managed to achieve all of those things. And even in utter collapse, like lying in bed, unable to get out of bed for 4 weeks, still, emails. Like if I don't have energy to walk, I've still got fingers, So yeah, there's got to be some kind of crisis that has to occur to sit back and have a look at
Yeah.
this is not working for me in life now. It never has. And it's a slow, organic process, isn't it? And as you say, it's like a recovery. And you've always just got to be really mindful of like stepping into that zone. And have you got like little signs that tell you now that, okay, this is one step too far, Adele?
I start to get really feel tight in my jaw, and my vision starts to get a bit blurry. So I start to actually feel physically that I'm tight. There's a tightness and a denseness, and I start to feel like dehydrated, really. And when I know that that's happening, I know that I need to prioritize rest. I can be a bit snappy, a bit irritated with Jeff, a bit irritated, like when I'm walking my dog, might just yank the leash, or come on now, we've got to walk, as opposed to let's walk the dog. It's like we got to walk the dog. So when the monster kicks in, she's a bit tense and serious, and it's just kind of getting that there's too much. I've underestimated the amount of things I've taken on. I'm now trying to do everything perfectly, and now I need to kind of set boundaries and like restructure like what I'm doing. And then I just got to take a step back and remember to rest, because 9 times out of 10, perfectionists hang out in the clarity and kind of they're at the response barrier, where they're always like, they're either insight barrier, response barriers. They're either struggling to get clarity, or they're struggling to actually calculate effective action. And when you're stuck there, you can't move. What you got to do is go back to rest. You got to have rest and relax, and kind of be at that stage of the previous cycle that you were in. because from that space of great rest comes the perspective that is needed for insight and to calculate your response. So it's recognizing it and like, oh yeah, I need to rest. Like the best thing I can do today, instead of running around and yanking my poor dog around, the lake, I can actually just sleep, have a
Yeah.
nap, have a rest, lie in the hammock, read a book. And it doesn't feel okay to do so. It feels like counterintuitive. It feels like I can't rest right now. I have to keep going. But when I'm doing that, I'm confusing activity with progress, and I'm probably not being effective in what I'm doing.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's almost like you got to sit there, you've got to empty out the tank or the backpack, right, with all this stuff. And then you have to rest, and then you have to really sit back and get clarity on what's going back in the vacuum or the bag. Like what is it? And then you start to go, well, actually, for me, it's like I have to do yoga. I
Mm-hmm.
have to walk. Like that has to really come in to support my well-being now. Because one of my signs of moving into, oh, that's just too much now, Sam, is it's quite common, I understand. I count. I count incessantly.
Huh.
And so I'll say to John, oh no, I'm counting again, which means it's too much.
Yeah.
And I count books on the bookshelf, tiles on the floor.
Yeah. Yeah, I get that. Yeah.
And what's really disappointing is I only ever get to 10.
Yeah.
And I said, John, by now I should be doing algorithms
Yeah. Yeah.
but it's quite interesting. So that's my barometer. Yours is your tight jaw and snappy mind.
Eyes and snappiness and kind of like monstery, like determination. And it's relentless. And when I start feeling like that, and I can see it starts impacting other people, it's like I now have this awareness thing that kicks in. It's like, okay, stop. This is now too much. You need to pull back, reprioritize, which is really what you're saying. But also like go back in the cycle and rest, because whatever I'm doing is now going to get ineffective. I'm going to take lots of action. I'm probably going to have to redo it because I haven't done anything effective. And then I'm going to be miserable because I haven't done what I was supposed to be doing. And also getting like perfectionists overestimate what they can do in a day. We take on way too many things at any given time, and it's not sustainable and it's not achievable. So by doing less, we can produce better in the long run and nudge things forward, as opposed to I must do all the things right now, immediately. Like where does, that is not actually a recipe for success in any book.
And I think just to close off on that is that from one perfectionist to another, or too many who might be listening to this podcast, is that rest is the elixir of life when you're a perfectionist. That you can't move out of anything until you have rest and clarity. So that would be my take home for today, actually.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, so next time we're going to be deepening more into stress and looking at some of the kind of health things that people can do, like looking at HRV and looking at, some of the, you touched on it in the last podcast. We were a little bit deeper on like kind of treatments, from a health perspective, and also the triaging of stress. There's lots of really cool things I do therapeutically. I know you do therapeutically, of how, like, when you're in that overwhelm, like, how do you now back out of it? How do you, like, okay, I've messed everything up. It's way too complicated. I now need to exit left. How do we do that? And, particularly when I work with corporate burnout, like people have got themselves into a right pickle, and it's like, okay, let's roll up our sleeves and back out of the corner you have painted yourself into. Yeah.
So some strategies, isn't it, that we're going to be discussing next week, which as a perfectionist, love a good strategy.
I love it. My manager part is very relieved with a bit of an action plan.
Oh yeah. I'm feeling it. I look forward to meeting with you next week and using all the things health, relationships, and trauma. So until
that time. Oh, goodbye. The information shared on the Naked Insights podcast is for educational and information purposes only. and is not intended as a substitute for professional therapy or counseling. While we aim to provide helpful and accurate insights, individual experiences may vary. If you're experiencing trauma, mental health issues, or distress, please seek guidance from a qualified professional. The views expressed by us as the hosts are our own and do not necessarily reflect the opinions or positions of any affiliated organizations.